The Varth Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 847 star systems, and every species they met had two choices: kneel or die. Most chose to kneel. The ones who chose to fight learned very quickly why that was a mistake. At the heart of the Varth war machine were the Kethari. They were the warrior caste, born and bred for one purpose: killing. Each Kethari stood 9 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in natural armor, an exoskeleton harder than the hull of a battleship. Their 4 arms ended in claws that could tear through steel like paper. Their eyes could see in complete darkness, and their reflexes were so fast they could dodge a plasma bulb after it was fired. No species had ever defeated a Kethari in single combat. Not once in 12,000 years. The Varth had built a monument to their dominance. They called it the Crucible of Ash. It was not a building or a stadium. It was an entire moon, hollowed out and transformed into the greatest arena the galaxy had ever seen. Champions from 100 conquered worlds had fought there. They had all lost. Their bones decorated the walls. When humanity discovered faster than light travel, they thought they were ready for the universe. They were wrong. Admiral Chen Wei was commanding the exploration vessel ESS Defiance when the Varth found them. The ship was mapping a new system near the edge of human space when a shadow fell across the sensors. Chen Wei looked at the readings and felt her blood go cold. 17 Vorath dreadnoughts surrounded her single ship. Each dreadnought was the size of a small city. The Defiance was like a mouse caught between the paws of 17 cats. A transmission came through. On the screen appeared a Varth unlike any Chen Wei had seen in the first contact files. He was massive, even by Kethari standards. Scars covered his exoskeleton, each one a mark from a battle he had won. One of his eyes was missing, replaced by a glowing red implant. His name, the computer translated, was Thrakul the Unbroken. He had killed more champions than any Kethari in history. He had never lost a fight. He had never even been seriously hurt. Thrakul looked at Chen Wei the way a person might look at an insect on their food. His voice came through the translator with a tone of absolute boredom. "Small creatures," he said. "Soft creatures. You have entered space that belongs to the Dominion. For this crime, your world will be claimed. Your people will serve us. But the Varth are not without mercy. We offer you the trial of worth." Chen Wei kept her face calm. Inside, her heart was racing. What is the trial of worth? Thrakul's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. "Send your 10 finest warriors to the Crucible of Ash. They will fight our champions. If even one of your warriors survives the gauntlet and defeats our best, your species will be granted status as a minor race. You will keep your world. You will pay tribute, but you will live. And if we refuse, then we burn your world now. Every city, every person, every memory that you ever existed." Thrakul leaned closer to the screen. "You have 1 cycle to decide." The transmission ended. Chen Wei sent the message to Earth immediately. The response came within hours. Every government on Earth had agreed. They had no choice. The Varth fleet could reach Earth in days, and humanity had nothing that could stop even one of those dreadnoughts. Let alone 17. The call went out across the planet. Earth needed champions. Millions volunteered. The selection process took 2 weeks. The chosen 10 came from every corner of the planet. There were soldiers and scientists, doctors and engineers. Some were famous. Others were ordinary people who had shown something extraordinary in the tests. Sarah Okonkwo was a former Special Forces operative from Nigeria. She had survived missions that should have killed her a dozen times. Marcus Webb was a surgeon from Canada who could find the weakness in any system, biological or mechanical. Yuki Tanaka was a xenobiologist from Japan who understood alien life better than anyone on Earth. James Mwangi was a quiet man from Kenya who said little about his past. The selection committee had watched him fight 7 opponents at once during testing. He had not been touched. The transport ship left Earth 3 weeks after the Varath ultimatum. It carried no weapons that the Varath could detect. The 10 champions wore no armor. They looked exactly like what the galaxy expected: small, soft, fragile humans going to their deaths. The ship arrived at the Crucible of Ash. Even Chen Wei, who had seen the Varath dreadnoughts up close, was not prepared for what she saw. The moon filled the entire view screen. Its surface was covered in viewing platforms where millions of spectators could watch the fights below. Ships from 100 species orbited around it, all gathered to watch humanity die. The 10 humans walked down the landing ramp into the arena's preparation area. Thrakel was waiting for them. He towered over them, his remaining eye studying each one. Behind him stood 5 Cathari warriors, each one a legend in their own right. The translator crackled as Thrakel laughed. It was not a kind sound. "These are your champions? These tiny things?" He reached out and poked Marcus Webb in the chest. Webb stumbled back a step. "I have seen prey animals with more muscle. I have seen children with more size." He turned to address the cameras that were broadcasting to 1 trillion viewers across the galaxy. "Look well, citizens of the Dominion. Look at what passes for warriors among the humans. This will be quick. This will be amusing. And then it will be over." He turned back to the humans. "Tomorrow the gauntlet begins. You will face our lesser champions first. Those you manage to defeat, if any, will be replaced by stronger ones. If you reach the top of the ladder, you will face the Cathari." His scarred face twisted with contempt. "But you will never reach the top. None of you will survive the first day." Sarah Okonkwo stepped forward. She was half Thrakel's height. She had to crane her neck to look at his face. The galaxy watched, expecting her to beg, to plead, to show the fear that any sensible creature would feel. Instead, she smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of something that knew a secret, something that was looking forward to what came next. "We'll see," she said. Thrakel stopped laughing. For just a moment, something flickered in his eye. It was not fear. Cathari did not feel fear. But it was something close to it. Something he had not felt in 400 years. He pushed the feeling aside. These were humans. They were nothing. He would learn how wrong he was. The Crucible of Ash operated on a simple system. New challengers started at the bottom of a ladder. They fought their way up, facing stronger opponents with each victory. Most species died on the 1st or 2nd row. The best might make it to the 5th or 6th before falling. No one except the Cathari had ever reached the top. Sarah Okonkwo was the first human to fight. The arena floor was a circle of black sand, half a kilometer wide. The stands rose around it like the inside of a bowl, packed with millions of spectators from dozens of species. Giant screens floated in the air, showing close-up images of the fight to viewers who were too far away to see clearly. The same images were being broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Sarah walked onto the sand barefoot. She wore simple clothes that allowed her to move freely. She carried no weapon. The crowd murmured with confusion. Every other species brought weapons, armor, anything that might give them an edge. The human brought nothing. Her opponent entered from the other side of the arena. It was a Dreth, a reptilian creature that stood 7 feet tall and weighed nearly 500 pounds. Its scales were thick enough to stop most blades. Its jaws could bite through bone. This particular Dreth had killed 43 champions in the Crucible. Its name translated roughly as Bone Crusher. The signal to begin sounded across the arena. Bone Crusher charged. Its footsteps shook the sand. It moved faster than something that large should be able to move, crossing the distance between them in seconds. Its clawed hand swung towards Sarah's head with enough force to take it clean off. Sarah was not there. She had stepped to the side at the last possible moment, letting the claw pass within inches of her face. Bone Crusher stumbled, surprised. It had never missed before. It swung again. Sarah ducked. It kicked. She jumped. It tried to grab her. She slipped away like water through fingers. For 3 minutes, this continued. Bone Crusher attacked with growing fury. Sarah moved with perfect calm. She never struck back. She never tried to hurt it. She just watched and moved, watched and moved. The crowd grew restless. This was not fighting. This was running. Some began to jeer. Others laughed. The humans were cowards, they said, too afraid to even try. Then Sarah stopped running. She had seen what she needed to see. Bone Crusher's right knee was slightly weaker than its left. The cartilage there had been damaged in a previous fight and had never healed properly. The creature favored it without realizing, putting just a little less weight on it during attacks. Sarah moved in. Bone Crusher swung at her. She did not dodge. Instead, she dropped low and drove her fist into the side of its right knee, hitting the exact spot where the cartilage was thinnest. The crack echoed across the arena. Bone Crusher roared in pain and stumbled. Its leg would not support it. As it fell forward, Sarah was already behind it. Her fingers found the cluster of nerves at the base of its skull, the spot where its brainstem connected to its spine. She pressed hard. Bone Crusher dropped face first into the sand. It was not dead. It was paralyzed, unable to move anything below its neck. It lay there, helpless, as Sarah Okonkwo stood over it. The arena fell silent. No one had ever defeated a Dreth that way. No one had ever thought to try. Strength against strength, the Dreth was unbeatable. But Sarah had not used strength. She had used knowledge. The second human fought an hour later. Marcus Webb faced a crystalline, a creature made of living silicon that could reshape its body into blades and shields. It had no organs to strike, no blood to spill. In 30 years of fighting, no one had found a way to hurt it. Marcus did not try to hurt it. Instead, he studied the way it moved, the way its crystals vibrated when it changed shape. He began to hum, a low sound that seemed almost too quiet to matter. Then he raised the pitch, finding the exact frequency that matched the crystalline structure. The creature stopped moving. Its body began to shake. Cracks appeared in its surface. Marcus kept humming, holding the note perfectly steady. The crystalline shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. Marcus had not touched it. He had simply found the resonant frequency that its silicon structure could not handle. It was basic physics, he explained later. Everything vibrates. Find the right frequency, and anything can be broken. By the end of the first day, 8 humans had fought. 7 had won. One, a young man from Brazil named Diego Santos, had been badly injured and could not continue. But he had won his match before falling, and his opponent would never fight again. The galaxy watched with growing disbelief. These soft creatures, these tiny humans, were doing the impossible. They were winning. Thrakel demanded explanations. He brought in scientists to examine the humans for hidden technology, secret weapons, anything that could explain what they were seeing. The scientists found nothing. The humans were exactly what they appeared to be, ordinary members of their species. How? Thrakel growled at Sarah Okonkwo. How are you doing this? Sarah considered the question. In her language, there was a word for what humans could do. It described the ability to change, to learn, to become what the situation required. But the translator could not find an equivalent in Vorth. Adaptation, she said finally, using the English word. Thrakel's translator tried to process it. The closest it could come was change in response to environment. But that did not capture what Sarah meant. It did not capture the millions of years of evolution that had shaped humanity. It did not capture the fact that humans had survived ice ages and deserts, plagues and famines, predators that were faster and stronger and deadlier than they were. Humans were not the biggest. They were not the strongest. They were not the fastest, but they learned. They adapted. They found the weakness in any enemy and exploited it without mercy. By the third day, 7 humans remained. They had fought their way through the lower ranks of the ladder, defeating champions from a dozen species. Each fight had been different. Each human had found a different way to win. Yuki Tanaka had faced a hive mind, a swarm of insects that shared a single consciousness. She had collected samples of its pheromones during the first minutes of the fight, then synthesized a command signal to turn the swarm against itself. The hive mind had torn itself apart while Yuki watched calmly from the edge of the arena. James Mwangi had faced 3 opponents at once, gladiators who had been promised freedom if they could kill a single human. He had moved through them like a ghost, never where they expected him to be, striking pressure points that left them unable to fight. When it was over, all 3 were alive but unconscious. James had not even raised his heartbeat. The betting pools that had given humanity no chance began to change. The odds grew longer. The whispers grew louder. And somewhere in the depths of the crucible, Thrakel the Unbroken made a decision. The gauntlet had rules. Challengers were supposed to work their way up the ladder fairly, facing each level in order. Thrakel did not care about rules. He cared about winning. And these humans needed to be stopped before they made the Varath look weak. He summoned the 5 greatest Kethari warriors alive. Champions who had never known defeat. Living weapons who had been honing their skills for centuries. The ladder was about to get much shorter. The announcement came without warning. The remaining levels of the ladder were being cancelled. The human champions would face the Kethari directly. Across the galaxy, viewers reacted with shock. This was against every tradition of the Crucible. The ladder existed for a reason. It gave challengers a fair chance to prove themselves, to grow stronger with each victory before facing the ultimate test. Skipping straight to the Kethari was not a test. It was an execution. The Varath did not care about fairness. They cared about ending this embarrassment before it got worse. The 5 Kethari who entered the arena were legends. Their names were known across 1,000 worlds. Vortek the Swift had killed more champions than any Kethari except Thrakel himself. Krathel the Strong had once torn a warship's hull open with his bare hands. Jeshka the Clever was known for her tactical mind, able to predict an opponent's moves before they made them. Garmuth the Relentless had fought for 72 hours straight without rest. And Valanak the Silent moved so quietly that victims often did not know. He was there until they were already dead. Any one of them would have been enough to destroy most champions. All 5 together were overkill the highest order. The humans drew lots to see who would fight first. Marcus Webb picked Vortek the Swift. They faced each other on the black sand. Vortek stood 9 feet tall, his exoskeleton gleaming under the arena lights. His forearms ended in claws that had pierced every kind of armor the galaxy had produced. His eyes tracked movement so fast that he could dodge lasers. Marcus Webb was bleeding from wounds he had received in earlier fights. One of his ribs was cracked. He had not slept in 2 days. He looked like exactly what he was, a tired, injured human facing an enemy that outclassed him in every physical way. The fight began. Vortek did not charge like the Dreth had. He was smarter than that. He approached carefully, testing Marcus with quick strikes, watching how the human moved. When Marcus tried to circle around him, Vortek cut him off. When Marcus tried to create distance, Vortek closed it. Within the first hour, Marcus was covered in cuts. Vortek was faster than anything he had faced before. The Cathari's claws seemed to come from everywhere at once. Marcus could dodge some of them, but not all. By hour 3, Marcus could barely stand. His left arm hung useless at his side, slashed to the bone. He was leaving bloody footprints in the sand. The crowd waited for him to fall. He did not fall. Instead, he watched. Even as his body failed, his mind kept working. He counted Vortek's strikes. He tracked the patterns. And slowly, so slowly, he began to see something. Vortek was ancient, hundreds of years old. He had developed habits over those centuries, tiny patterns that he repeated without thinking. Every 7th strike came from the upper left arm. Every 12th, he shifted his weight in a way that briefly exposed his throat. The gaps were tiny, measured in fractions of a second. A computer could never exploit them. The timing was too irregular, but Marcus was not a computer. He was a human being, and human beings were pattern recognition machines. It was what had let humanity survive on a planet full of predators. It was what let them see faces in clouds and hear music in noise. And it was what let Marcus Webb see the weakness in an enemy that had never been defeated. By hour 6, Marcus could not stand anymore. He fell to his knees in the sand. Vortek circled him, savoring the moment. By hour 11, Marcus was lying face down, his blood pooling around him. He looked dead. The crowd thought he was dead. Vortek stepped forward to claim his kill. Marcus moved. His hand shot up with the last of his strength. He had been holding something, a small sliver of bone that had broken off during the fight. He had been keeping it ready, waiting for the right moment. The 12th strike came. Vortek shifted his weight. His throat was exposed for a fraction of a second. The bone sliver drove into the soft tissue between his armor plates. It pierced his windpipe. It severed the artery beneath. Vortek the Swift fell. The arena erupted into chaos. A Cathari had fallen. Not just any Cathari, but one of the greatest warriors their species had ever produced. Killed by a half-dead human lying in a pool of his own blood, Marcus Webb smiled as the medical teams rushed onto the sand. He would live, barely, but he had done what no one thought possible. The remaining fights happened quickly. Sarah Okonkwo faced Krathol the Strong. She could not hurt him directly. His exoskeleton was too thick, his muscles too powerful. So she did not try. Instead, she made him chase her across the arena for hours, keeping just ahead of his grasp, letting him tire himself out. When he finally slowed, she struck at the joints of his armor, the places where strength did not matter. He fell like a puppet with cut strings. Yuki Tanaka faced Zheshka the Clever. It was a battle of minds as much as bodies. Zheshka could predict most attacks before they happened. But Yuki did not attack the way Zheshka expected. She used chaos, randomness, actions that followed no pattern. By the end, Zheshka could not predict anything because there was nothing to predict. A young man named Pavel Volkov faced Gurmuth the Relentless. It was a simple fight in concept. Gurmuth would not stop. Neither would Pavel. They fought for 2 days straight, neither one willing to quit. In the end, Pavel was still standing. Gurmuth was not. 3 Cathari had fallen. The Varath Dominion was in panic. Their undefeatable warriors were being defeated, one by creatures half their size. The last 2 Cathari, Vilanak the Silent and a champion named Bruthar, demanded something unprecedented. They wanted to face the human's strongest fighter together. 2 against 1. It was against every rule of the Crucible. But the rules had already been broken. James Mongi stepped onto the sand. Alone, Vilanak and Bruthar attacked in perfect coordination. They had trained together for decades. They knew each other's movements as well as their own. One struck high while the other struck low. One circled left while the other circled right. They were a killing machine with 4 minds and 8 arms. James Mwangi broke them in under 4 minutes. No one could explain how. The recording showed it happen, but even in slow motion, it was hard to follow. James seemed to know where they would be before they moved. He slipped between their attacks like water through a net. His strikes were precise, targeting the same pressure points he had used before, the places where even Kethari armor could not protect. When it was over, both Kethari lay in the sand, unable to move. Threkel himself descended to the arena floor. His eye blazed with fury as he stood over his fallen warriors. He looked at James Mwangi, this quiet human who had done the impossible. How? Threkel demanded. What are you? James considered the question. He was tired. His body ached from a dozen minor wounds. But his voice was calm when he answered. I grew up in Nairobi, he said. I was in a few fights. It was not really an answer, but it was all the answer Threkel would get. 5 Kethari had entered the arena. 5 had fallen. The undefeatable had been defeated. And now there was only 1 Kethari left who had never known defeat. Threkel the Unbroken stared at the humans with something new in his eye. It was not fear. Kethari did not feel fear, but it was close enough. He turned and walked away without another word. The final battle would come tomorrow. The night before the final battle, the Crucible of Ash was quiet. The spectators had returned to their ships to rest. The arena lay empty under the cold light of distant stars. The black sand still held the marks of the previous fights, dark stains where Kethari blood had soaked into the ground. In their holding area, the surviving humans slept. There were 5 of them left. Marcus Webb was in the medical bay, hovering between life and death, but the doctors said he would survive. The others had wounds of their own, but they would be ready to fight in the morning. James Mwangi sat alone in a corner, his eyes closed. He was not sleeping. He was thinking. Threkel the Unbroken was the final opponent. 400 years undefeated. The greatest warrior the Vorath had ever produced. Every trick the humans had used so far, every weakness they had exploited, none of it would work on Threkel. He had seen every fighting style in the galaxy. He had adapted to every threat. He was, in every measurable way, the perfect fighter, but James was not worried about winning. He was worried about what would happen after. The Vorath had not conquered 847 star systems by playing fair. Even if the humans won every fight, even if they proved themselves worthy beyond any doubt, the Dominion would not simply let them go. The stakes were too high. The shame of defeat was too great. James opened his eyes and looked at his companions. Sarah was sleeping fitfully, her hands twitching as she dreamed of fights yet to come. Yuki was reading something on a datapad, her face calm but her eyes tired. Pavel was staring at the ceiling, probably thinking about home. These people had trusted him. Earth had trusted him. And James knew something that the others did not. He knew what the humans had brought with them on that transport ship, hidden so well that even Vorath scanners could not find it. Morning came. The humans were escorted to the arena. The stands were fuller than they had ever been. Every species in the Dominion had sent representatives to watch the final battle. The betting pools had grown beyond measurement. Trillions of credits rode on the outcome. The humans waited on the sand. The time for the battle came and went. Threkel did not appear. Instead, his voice boomed across the arena from every speaker. The broadcast reached every ship in orbit, every world in the Dominion, every corner of the galaxy where beings were watching. Citizens of the Vorath Dominion, Threkel said, what you have witnessed in this arena is a deception. The humans have cheated. They have used hidden technology, banned substances, and forbidden psychic abilities to gain unfair advantage over our champions. The crowd murmured in confusion. There had been no evidence of cheating. The humans had been scanned repeatedly, and nothing had been found. Thrakel continued. The matches are void. The humans have proven nothing except their capacity for trickery. The trial of worth is cancelled. Humanity will receive no recognition, no status, no mercy. His voice grew harder, filled with cold fury. The Dominion fleet will proceed to the human homeworld immediately. Their planet will be cleansed. Their species will be erased. Let this serve as a lesson to any who would think to embarrass the Vorath through deception. The transmission ended. Sarah looked at James. Her face was calm, but her eyes were asking a question. James nodded slightly. It's time, he said quietly. Across the galaxy, the transmission from the Crucible had been received. On Earth, people watched with fear and despair. The Vorath fleet was coming. There was nothing that could stop it, or so they thought. Admiral Chen Wei was still aboard the ESS Defiance, orbiting the Crucible at a safe distance. She had been watching the events unfold with growing concern. Now she received a coded signal from the human holding area. A single word, execute. Chen Wei closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them and entered a command into her console. In orbit around the Crucible, 17 Vorath dreadnoughts began powering up their engines. They were preparing to jump to hyperspace, to make the journey to Earth that would end humanity forever. They never got the chance. The Defiance was a small ship, barely armed, designed for exploration rather than combat. But it carried something that the Vorath had never imagined. Something that humanity had developed in secret, shared with no one, kept hidden for exactly this moment. The device activated. There was no explosion, no flash of light, no dramatic display of any kind. One moment, the 17 dreadnoughts were there. The next moment, they were gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone. The Crucible itself began to shake. Its ancient systems flickered and failed. The communication arrays went dark. The gravity generators stuttered. Throughout the moon-sized station, alarms began to sound. Then the Crucible was gone too. Every ship in the system detected the same thing. Massive gravitational disturbances, followed by nothing. No debris, no radiation. No sign that the Vorath vessels had ever existed. The Vorath fleet that had been positioned around the Crucible, nearly 100 ships, panicked. They tried to contact command. There was no response. They tried to contact each other. Communications were being jammed. They tried to jump to hyperspace. Some of them made it. Most did not. When it was over, the system was empty except for scattered civilian vessels and the ESS Defiance. The Crucible of Ash, which had stood for 12,000 years as a monument to Vorath dominance, had vanished without a trace. Aboard the Defiance, Chen Wei looked at the empty space where the moon had been. Her hands were shaking. She had just given the order that changed everything. She had just revealed that humanity was not the helpless species the galaxy believed them to be. "Ma'am," her communications officer said, "we're receiving transmissions from all over the system. Everyone wants to know what happened." Chen Wei took a deep breath. "Tell them we have no comment at this time." "And the humans on the Crucible?" Chen Wei allowed herself a small smile. "They're safe. We extracted them before the device activated. They're already in hyperspace, heading home." The officer stared at her. "How is that possible?" "We saw them on the arena floor when the Crucible vanished. What you saw was what we wanted you to see." That was all she would say. That was all she would ever say. News of the vanishing spread across the galaxy faster than light. The Vorath Dominion had suffered the most devastating defeat in its history. 17 dreadnoughts, including the flagship of Thrakel the Unbroken, had disappeared. The Crucible of Ash, the greatest arena ever built, was gone. The entire warrior elite of the Cathari had been inside when it vanished. No one knew what had happened. No one could explain it, and the humans who had caused it said nothing at all. On the outer edges of the Dominion, conquered species began to whisper. The Varth were not invincible. They could be beaten. They could be made to disappear. The whispers grew louder. And somewhere in the void between stars, humanity's secret remained hidden, waiting for the next time it would be needed. 3 years passed. The Varth Dominion did not recover. Without the Crucible of Ash, they had lost more than a monument. They had lost the symbol of their power. For 12,000 years, the arena had proven their superiority to every species they conquered. Now it was gone, and no one could explain why. Worse, they had lost Thrakel the Unbroken and the entire Cathari elite. The greatest warriors of their civilization had vanished in an instant. The military commanders who remained were competent, but they were not legends. They were not UNDFEATABL. The conquered species noticed. Rebellions began on the outer worlds first. Small uprisings, easily crushed under normal circumstances. But circumstances were not normal. The Dominion's forces were spread thin. Their leaders were uncertain. For the first time in millennia, the Varth was showing weakness. The rebellion spread. By the end of the first year, a dozen worlds had broken free. By the end of the second year, the number was 50. The empire that had terrorized a quarter of the galaxy was crumbling like sand in water. And through it all, humanity said nothing. The 5 surviving champions had returned to Earth as heroes. They gave no interviews. They wrote no books. When journalists asked them what had happened in the final moments on the Crucible, they offered the same response every time: "We handled it." Sarah Okonkwo returned to her family in Lagos. She opened a small school where she taught self-defense to young girls. When students asked her about the Varth, she would smile and say that some fights were about more than strength. Marcus Webb needed 6 months to fully recover from his wounds. He went back to surgery, saving lives one patient at a time. He never spoke about his fight with Vortek, but sometimes, late at night, he would touch the scars on his arms and remember what it felt like to see the patterns in chaos. Yuki. Tanaka continued her research into alien biology. She published papers about the species she had encountered in the Crucible, helping humanity understand the galaxy they had entered. She never mentioned how she had defeated the hive mind. Some knowledge, she believed, was too dangerous to share. Pavel Volkov returned to his hometown in Russia. He married his childhood sweetheart, started a family, and lived a quiet life. Once a year, on the anniversary of his fight with Garmuth, he would go for a long run through the forest. He never got tired. James Mwangi disappeared. Some said he had returned to Kenya. Others claimed to have seen him in a dozen different countries. A few believed he was working with Earth's government on matters too secret to discuss. The truth was that no one knew where James Mwangi had gone or what he was doing. But sometimes, when trouble appeared on the edges of human space, it had a way of resolving itself. Pirates would abandon their attacks without explanation. Hostile species would suddenly seek peace treaties. Threats would simply vanish, as if something had removed them from the equation. No one could prove anything. But the rumors spread anyway. In the 3rd year after the vanishing, a diplomatic summit was held on a neutral world. Representatives from 100 species gathered to discuss the new order that was emerging from the collapse of the Varth Dominion. Humanity sent its own representative, Admiral Chun Wei, now Ambassador Shen Wei Dod. She walked into the conference hall with the same calm confidence she had shown on the bridge of the Defiance. Every eye in the room turned to watch her. These were beings who had witnessed stars die and civilizations fall. But something about this small human woman made them uneasy. The Gathric's ambassador, a massive creature with 6 limbs and crystalline eyes, approached her during a break in the proceedings. Ambassador Chun, he said, his translator giving his voice a formal tone. My government has been discussing the events at the Crucible. We have questions. Chun Wei sipped her tea. I'm sure you do. The Varath fleet was the most powerful force in the galaxy. 17 dreadnoughts. The Crucible itself was protected by shields that could withstand a supernova. Yet all of it vanished in an instant, leaving no trace. The ambassador leaned closer. My government wishes to know, what weapon did humanity use? Chen Wei set down her tea with a gentle clink. We're a patient species, she said. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. Ice ages, plagues, predators that were bigger and faster and stronger than we were. We survived all of it. She looked up at the ambassador. In her eyes was something ancient and cold. We don't forget, she said. And we don't forgive those who threaten our home. The ambassador waited for more. More did not come. But what was the weapon? He pressed. How did you do it? Chen Wei smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the same smile that Sarah Okonkwo had given Thrakel in the arena. The smile of something that knew a secret and would never share it. We don't explain ourselves. She picked up her tea and walked away. The summit continued. Treaties were signed. Alliances were formed. A new galactic concord emerged to fill the void left by the Dominion's collapse. Humanity was given a seat at the highest table, treated as an equal by species that had been traveling the stars. When humans were still learning to make fire, no one asked about the vanishing again. They had learned that some questions would not be answered, but in the quiet moments. In the deep spaces between stars, the older species told stories to their young. They spoke of the soft creatures who had come from a small blue world, who had looked weak and harmless, who had been dismissed as no threat at all. They spoke of the Crucible of Ash and the mightiest fighters who had ever lived. They spoke of the challenge that was issued and the battles that followed. They spoke of how the humans had won not through strength or speed, but through something else, something that no other species quite understood. And they spoke of the vanishing, of the moment when humanity had shone. The galaxy, what happened to those who threatened them? The old ones would lean close and whisper the lesson that every young being needed to learn. Never threaten a human's home. Never harm their people. Never assume that because they are small, they are weak. Because humans are patient. They remember everything. And when they decide that you are a threat, the old ones would pause here. Letting the silence speak, you disappear. And somewhere in the darkness of space, 17 dreadnoughts and a moon-sized arena drifted in a place that had no name. Their crews were long dead, frozen in the void between dimensions. Thrakel the Unbroken floated among them, his single eye still open, still staring at nothing. They had dared humanity. They had threatened Earth. They had thought themselves invincible. They had been wrong. The galaxy moved on. New powers rose and fell. Species came and went. But one truth remained constant across the centuries. Humanity was not to be trifled with, and those who forgot that lesson would learn it the hard way. Just like the Varath.